Hi, everyone, and welcome back to PlanFirst Live. Today's topic is it better to rebuild or to renovate? And that's quite controversial, but quick little introduction from myself. I'm Sian Larkin. I'm the manager of design services here at PlanFirst Design. And with me today, my guest is Nick Lico. Again, Nick, quick introduction from your side.
Hello, Sian. I'm a registered architect in New Zealand. We operate several companies that offer both architecture and construction, and I'm pleased to be invited. We certainly have a lot of background in whether to rebuild or whether to renovate.
Yeah, Nick, I think you are pretty well placed to discuss this topic. Because you're both an architect and you have a renovation business.
Correct.
I think good inputs will be coming from your side. A little bit about PlanFirst, for those that don't know. We're a company that specializes in design, architectural, interior and landscaping design, interior decorating, quantity surveying and engineering. So to jump straight into this week's topic, I will just share my presentation. Is it better to renovate or rebuild? Now, how does one decide? There's a number of factors that you've got to think about. One of the biggest ones would be location. Secondly, the actual structure of your house and the state that it's in. Is it failing? Or the foundation's failing? Is the wiring in need of updates? So there's a couple of factors that we'll talk about. Also taste and style of your house. But let's go through them one by one. All right, location. You may have bought a house which is in a neighborhood where over time, your neighbors have all rebuilt, and they've rebuilt houses that have really elevated the value of the neighborhood. So in an instance like that, you might want to, it might be worth your while to actually rebuild as opposed to renovating, so that you can maximize the value of the property that you have. Secondly is your neighborhood. The character and the zoning. So are you close to schools? Are you friends? Have you got friends that live in the neighborhood? Is there a sense of community where you really feel that you belong? And also then accessibility and lifestyle. So as I mentioned, schools in the area. Do you use public transport to commute to your job? If so, you would want to be located close to public transport, train stations, buses, etc. And of course, shopping malls. That these things all play a factor in deciding to rebuild, renovate, or even possibly if it suits you to resell or sell and to rebuy something else closer to amenities. You'd also look at the age and style of your home. Has it got historical significance? If it does, you would most probably rather renovate. Of course, architectural character as well. Some people like to combine old character with modern. So that would be another factor to look at. The condition of your house. Is it really in need of major repairs? I mean, this is a little bit extreme, but I suppose it could happen, Nick. I don't know whether you've seen anything like this in your time.
Absolutely. And sometimes they're actually worth renovating, as you say.
Yes, if you're really keen on, emotions come into it as well. If there's a lot of sentimental value in the house, then yes, renovation is preferable. Then of course the extent of the desired change. Is it a small change, or are you just renovating bathrooms, putting in a new kitchen? maybe a small extension, or do you want to redo the footprint entirely? Has your family actually just outgrown the house and you need to do so many changes to it that it's just not feasible to do a renovation? And like I mentioned, taste and lifestyle. So you could do a modern extension to an existing home, which does have architectural and historical value. Have you outgrown your space? Do you need a home office? You may have started off in a smaller home just as a newly married couple, and over the years you've acquired a couple of kids and you just don't have the space that you need. So no home office, open plan would be better suited, etc., etc. Have a look at the finances as well, because firstly, before you make the decision, have all the financial facts on the table. And it wouldn't necessarily just be the cost of the actual renovation or rebuild. You've got to consider factors like, if you're going to renovate, if it's a major renovation, you would need to move out of the house. And of course, you'd have to pay for that accommodation over that period of time. And have a look also at the value that it's going to add to your house. Renovation generally will add massive value to the house, especially if you're doing new kitchens, new bathrooms, etc. With renovation, you're going to be doing a greener option because you are going to be retaining the materials that you've currently got. So you're not going to be demolishing the entire house. So that is the greener choice. But with rebuilding, you can maximize your energy efficiency. So you can add a lot of features into the new build, which would be, really reduce your energy costs every month. So you just got to weigh up those two factors when you have a look at the financial aspect of the project as well. And again, emotional factors. Sometimes houses are passed down from generation to generation. So they've really got a lot of emotion and sentiment around them. And that could be a massive reason to actually renovate as opposed to rebuild, because you want to keep all those memories alive. And just a little bit in closing, when you make your decision between the two, you've really got to get the sweet spot. So weigh up all the factors, have all the information on the table before you even think of making a choice, and speak to the experts, speak to an architect, speak to a builder, speak to a real estate agent, and speak to a financial advisor, and get opinions from them. Take all those opinions, mold it into one before making your decision. Nick, with that, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Sian. Just while you've been presenting, there's been a number of questions come through, and the only reason I'm mentioning those is I've been reading them, and actually my presentation, I think, will answer quite a number of them.
Okay, great.
So is the first slides visible? No, I've still got to go present, don't I? Ah, there we go. Right, great. So these are moving through. Excellent. Okay. So I just wanted to speak through a number of practical examples in relation to this topic. So I'm going to actually use second story extensions as an example very quickly. And we've just done this slide to show a project where we added a second floor onto an existing home. In terms of weighing up whether you rebuild or whether you renovate, or in this case extend, I just wanted to show some actual facts. By adding a second story onto an existing house, there's a couple of costs you incur which you don't when you build new. You're literally taking tin snips to a roof, so that means you're actually opening up the house and exposing it to the weather. And what that implies is that you're going to actually have about $50,000 additional scaffolding, and effectively you're going to wrap the house. People, the viewers will have seen those homes where you literally see these enormous structures that are encased in white plastic. You don't have to incur that cost when you build from new. The other thing is, like a deck of cards, if you're going to add on top of a house, you're going to end up creating quite a significant amount of damage to the existing house downstairs. It's much more arduous if it's an already renovated home, because you're actually destroying the floors, the walls, to basically create stronger foundations. And these are true costs from projects that we've done. And that can be a cost in the vicinity of $200,000. You're not going to incur that when you're building new. So where I'm heading with that is, regardless of the scale of the renovation to build a second story, you're going to incur about potentially $250,000. This is on a relatively small second story of only about 50 square meters. And the reason I wanted to use this as an example is that additional cost compared to building new is about $5,000 per square meter. So to do a second story extension, you're in a situation where the build cost is costing you about $10,000 plus per square meter compared to new. And that's not for an extravagant architectural solution either. So when does this type of project happen? A little bit like you can see in the photo here, they're not frequent projects. They tend to be in areas where the house prices are already relatively expensive. So that this is a Wellington Harbour project, only one street back from the foreshore. It's not an economic solution, unfortunately, in more modest priced housing neighborhoods. And that's why with that additional $250,000 spend, sometimes from the consulting we do early on in projects, the decision is made to go and just buy a bigger house. So this is a picture of a commonly understood suburban type development. This is not one of our projects. This is not the market we're in. Effectively, the reason I wanted to show this slide, what kind of drives renovations versus rebuilds? And it's actually pretty simple. And that's what I mean. It relates to the questions. It's economics, cost, and budget expectations. And there comparatively is a house, an existing house in Wellington on a hillside. And what I'm trying to illustrate in these two images, there is a house, the old house. It's not just the character. It's not the character that I'm looking at. It's effectively that they actually built this house on a sloping site. The new subdivision, to create economies of return, it effectively puts a huge amount of investment into what happens below the floor. In these older homes, effectively they worked with the landscape. I couldn't tell you why 100 years ago that was different. I think interesting two slides, because even ornamentally, when people talk about character, there were certainly different economic drivers. I mean, we've only got a few minutes, so this could seriously be a 6-hour kind of lecture series in terms of that detail. So I actually wanted to illustrate one project that we actually built just to finish off and then field the questions. This is a house that we renovated. That up the top is a before, during construction, and then after photo. And what I wanted to comment on here is I started with second story extensions that are very arduous because they come with an infrastructure cost, regardless of what you do to build upwards, that you don't incur when you build from new. Here is another example, flipping that, like the image I showed of the character house in Mount Victoria, where most people would consider the merit in this house, if you renovate, is actually in the ornate detail. I believe the value in this house is actually in the foundations and the retaining walls and not having to rebuild them. And that's why I wanted to give an example here that this is effectively an approximately $1 million project at the time when we built it. 40% of the cost, had we rebuilt this, would have gone into about a $400,000 spend in rebuilding the garage and the elements that are actually embedded into the landscape. And that's why we're seeing on newer suburban subdivision type projects, where there's actually a more affordable economies of scale to, in fact, upfront spend a bigger cost on flattening the land so that you can build a flat concrete slab to eliminate or actually lower that 40% cost upfront. So I hope I've articulated that okay, that in fact, a house like this, there are a lot more photos in the construction I could have shown, but time's limited. The owner was quite highly distressed through this project, which is part of our role to support them in that, because we know the end result and where it's going to end up. When we actually started demolishing this house, and there, I remember the moment quite clearly. What have we done? In the sense that there's very little left in the house. And I had to basically reassure them there's quite a lot left in the house, which was the lower floors, the garaging, all the infrastructure foundations that if this was to be rebuilt, it would have incurred a $400,000 rebuild to get to the same level of elements that are actually below the floor. I think we'll better just cap it at that. I hope that answers some of the questions as well.
I think we'll go through the questions, but it's very valid, Nick, what you were saying. There's a lot that is unseen, a lot of cost that is unseen underneath the ground. You know, and even if you look at the electricals and the plumbing, those are not things that you see, but it is cost that gets incurred.
Yeah, that's correct, and that's where you have to make the economic decision, as you say, whether to rebuild or to basically renovate. And that's why I wanted to use two examples. One where on a second story is just like you're saying, the plumbing and the electrical. On the flip side, there can actually be massive advantages, not just character retention.
Yeah. That's why it's so important, I think, to get the full picture and to get a proper cost estimate before making the decision. You know, spend a bit of time.
A consultant that knows how to assess that.
Absolutely.
And you know, that's effectively where we are. A true renovation expert is very different.
Yes.
To somebody that is only familiar with effectively designing properties that are on a flat piece of property.
Or new builds even.
Correct. That's exactly right. And a lot of our new builds, for that reason, tend to be on complex sites. I've actually seen quotes for houses where a customer doesn't want to engage with a consultancy, and they'll ask a company that builds a lot of new houses. And I saw one which I thought was terrific, where the housing company basically said, here's the price of the house, excluding anything under the ground, under the floor. So what they were saying there is that's correct. You're going to actually have to pay for a consultancy with a professional expert to basically assess what is that other 40% risk.
Well, if I look at New Zealand as an example, the asbestos is also a fact, that needs to be considered, because that could be, if you do have asbestos and you're doing a renovation, that needs to be removed by specialists potentially.
That's correct. Correct. The regulations changed some 10 years ago to become more stringent on that. And I suspect they changed the rules for the fact that a lot of people were trying to circumnavigate that as a cost. And so it was obviously becoming a health and safety risk.
Yeah. All right, let's have a look at this first question. What's the very first thing a homeowner should consider when deciding between rebuilding or renovating? Nick, what's your opinion on that?
Economics. Simple. As I mentioned, second stories, a $250,000 infrastructure cost. Why do people then do it? Because it basically is in an area generally that has other houses to lift them up to that standard. So that example I gave was a single story house. It actually economically ended up becoming a very successful project because there were neighboring properties that had values to basically reflect the cost of the project.
I would say economics and also emotion. I don't think it's just about the economics. I think sentiment comes into it as, equally as economics does. All right, let's have a look. Next question. How does the age or style of a home influence the decision? Well, Nick, you would know, sometimes when you open up the walls, you get nasty surprises. And that relates to the age of a home. You can't factor that in until you've opened up those walls.
No, you can't. But generally, people who are listening in have probably watched, shows like Grand Designs. When we see the one in the UK in particular, there's intrinsic value in a lot of homes. And that's why I say that we could turn this into a much longer series where we could show case studies. And I get that question quite regularly. Was it worth it to renovate versus build new? And those are questions we obviously discuss and assess at great length early on. And there are so many factors to it. But the character homes that we've renovated rather than demolished, there's so much intrinsic value. They have the risks, as you say, which is like the plumbing and the electrical. In many cases, we fully replace roofs. We fully reline houses. And you often think, was that really worth it? And the answer is yes. Yes. And the owners see that by the end of the job. It's also, and sorry, just one more comment on that. Through this series, I've made a couple of car analogies. There's no such thing as a replica Porsche.
No, there isn't.
The same with a house.
Some zoning permissions, they keep the character, that old historic charm, and you actually are not allowed to demolish any of the houses. You have to renovate. Then your decisions are actually made for you.
That's right. Yeah, we've been a bit absurd here, but you could rebuild the Acropolis out of glass reinforced concrete. I don't think it'll happen.
No, I don't think so either.
And I hope that's not a bad example, but there is truth and meaningfulness to that. And homeowners who are interested in renovating understand that emotional intrinsicness.
All right. Our next question is, Oh, we've actually already chatted about this. What emotional factors come into play when choosing between the two options? I think we've spoken about that already, haven't we?
Yes.
What structural issues usually tip the scale towards rebuilding? I would say foundations is the major one.
100%. And I think my second case study where I made that very clear point, what happens below the floor is about 40% of the cost, especially on a hillside.
Also, I think, Nick, if you look at structure, it could also be, if we spoke about this, it could have been last week or the week before. If you're making an open plan home, you still need to retain a certain amount of structure, to support and to create bracing for the home.
Correct. And that's why sometimes I like some of the images you showed that depending on the situation, projects with, again, it's a much bigger series. If you extend an existing house outwards, you're not going to incur those restructural changes. And so, like you say, Sian, every home has its own specific considerations. It's absolutely paramount not just to pick a builder that's a referral because it's somebody's relative, or they effectively did a bathroom renovation that turned out well. This is a comment specific to this topic. It has to be a specialist that actually can show the case studies.
I think often people think that they will save money by going with somebody they know or the cheaper option. But at the end of the day, it actually then would potentially cost them more because the person is not a specialist and they're not familiar with renovations per se.
Exactly. Yes.
All right, let's have a look at the next question. How can homeowners make sure their decisions add long-term value? Now, my answer to that would be consult an estate agent and see what the value of the houses are in the area.
I have to agree with it, and it's not always good news. It's one of the reasons we encourage an early consultation. We don't actually charge for that. Because we want people to have a good result. We do care about their home ownership. And I'll give you two polarizing examples. I gave that example that I showed where we built a second story, and exactly as you're saying, Sian, that basically could carry the economic cost. Even the second example I gave, which had an intrinsic value in the lower part, that was a costly renovation. Again, that's a beachfront property, and that's a reality. We still advise homeowners, even if I effectively have intuitive feel that that's not going to be the result. And I'll give you an example of that where it is unfortunate that it is an economic condition, but we provide the same professional and respectful advice. If we look at any neighborhoods where potentially they don't have that capability to carry the cost of that development, we often end up suggesting to them, have you thought about possibly buying a house in another neighborhood? And I don't want to mention specific areas. It's the same wherever the region or the territory is. We've made that recommendation. I've had very grateful homeowners from the honesty that I've provided on that. And then they've taken that advice and bought a house in another area. There's good karma in this because I've actually had phone calls from a number of homeowners that I gave that advice to in the 13 years that we've operated this company that have actually then rung me and we've done renovations.
I think it's our responsibility as designers to give them honest opinion and honest advice, and then they can make their decisions from that.
You have to give them, I couldn't agree more. You have to give them honest advice, transparent advice. Interestingly enough, the Institute of Architects here in New Zealand, probably 5 years ago now, changed the code of conduct that an architect actually has to be experienced in the advice they're giving. And, so that actually applies to renovations and houses. I would actually quite comfortably make the comment that a commercial architect who's building airports is not relevantly skilled to be providing that advice on a house renovation, only because it's a smaller project.
Yes. All right, Nick, I think our time for this week, it went very quickly, but just quickly. Next week's topic, we're going to be talking about how to design for privacy without losing light. And Nick won't be joining us next week. Kim Reicke will be joining us. But Nick, you'll most probably be back the following week. And thank you all for joining and for all the comments that we got. If we didn't get to your comments today, feel free to reach out. Our website and 0800 number details are on the screen. You're also welcome to reach out through Facebook and follow our Instagram. And we look forward to seeing you all again next week. Thanks, Nick, for joining us.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for inviting me. Bye.
Bye-bye.